I've got to pause here and talk about a Bible rhetorical technique to display divine authorship, which I like to call threading. You're going to see some pictures of weaving looms and the weaving process. Now you'll notice that in those pictures, there's a machine on which thread is strung, one thread at a time, across the loom. Okay, but that means you have to have a loom. Now if you're going to do the same kind of thing with words, which is what the Bible actually does, each writer weaves all the old words to the new words he's writing to demonstrate he's getting them from God. If you're doing that with words in your head, then if it's flawless, the only one who could be enabling that to occur is God. I mean, it's hard enough to do it with physical thread. And the Bible's got, millions of words? So, for a person to be able to do that kind of weaving with words in his head, right off the top of his head, because all these guys are giving their prophecies or, writing their books, whatever, straight onto the paper from their head. To do that would require divine power. So to me, you can't really test for God's existence except by recourse to whatever book claims to be from God. So if it was the Cainan, I would have to look at the Cainan and the character of its writing to see the character of the author and to see the internal consistency of the writing compared to the prior Bible books, which the Cainan claims to update. The same thing is true, and always has been, the rule for any new revelation from God. In other words, when Genesis was written, Moses wrote the first 5 books, but even with Genesis alone, the word had been known orally prior for what? Let's see, it was 1400 BC when he began writing it. He wrote it for a period, it was 1440 BC when he began writing it. He wrote it for a period of 40 years, the first 5 books. That information had been already known prior to him writing it, so they were able to test what he wrote with what they knew, and then they could go through the internal consistency of the writing to test for divine genius. And of course, he's writing straight from his head onto, whatever medium they used in those days. Probably papyrus, but, the point is that it's not like a computer where you have an easier time of doing this kind of thing, and even with a computer, to be able to thread all those concepts together in a flawless manner would have to indicate divine existence and power. And every writer after Moses would have to take everything Moses wrote and thread, like a loom, all those prior threads of the fabric, as it were, of what he wrote, into their new books. And then the reader is supposed to test the old material with the new material to see if it's divine. And that's been the rule all the time. And that's why certain books that claim to be from God are ruled out, because they don't pass the thread test. And just like, if fabric is poorly made, the threads will not connect. They won't carry through, especially if it's a thick fabric. Alright, so for it to be perfectly woven, it's got to be God. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up here is that Isaiah is going to demonstrate this idea of weaving within his own chapter. And as I just said in Isaiah 52:13 and 14, he sets up the themes and the key words of the chapter, and now it's his task to weave them through. And he starts doing that in 52:15. And it's so phenomenal how he does that. I don't think I can do it justice to explain it, but I first have to tell you about this threading technique. Every Bible writer uses it. It's his job. It's the way he establishes divine authorship for the book. And so that by the time you get to Revelation, John's job is to weave the entire Bible through the book of Revelation, because it's the last book. And he does do that, but, to study it and read it and understand it and see it, you actually have to use the original languages. You cannot use a translation to see this. And I'm going to try to show something of that truth here in Isaiah 52:15. I'm going to show you how he does the threading. And it's a very simple example, and you could always say, just from this verse alone, well, that's not necessarily divine. And yeah, if that was the only verse in the Bible, you could say that. If the whole Bible was just these 3 verses, you could say a really smart human did that. But you can't say it when you have like 3,000 pages of Bible. And you can't say it when you have the New Testament threading back flawlessly to the Old. And of course, if you don't know how to test the threading, if you don't know how to examine the Bible in the original language texts, you're not going to be able to see this. And that's why you need divine power to even read it. Really read it. I mean, you can get surface things out of it even without divine power, just like you can any book. But to really see the divine in it, you need divine power, and God gives it to you directly. Now, if you're a believer, you need to use 1 John 1:9 when you're studying the Bible in order to see this. And you got to do it over and over and over again. Just because you get God's brains doesn't mean that you can be slothful. You have to have all the discipline of an academic. This is very much a scientific process. Okay, you have to test it. There are all kinds of rules that you have to look for and follow. You have to know the grammar. You have to know the use of the definite article especially. You have to understand rules like how the tenses work and when they switch. Tense switching is real important. Tracking prepositions is real important. So you see, you have to get those abilities. Now, God supernaturally enables you to learn it a lot faster than you would humanly. And He enables you to know where the dots connect. Like when you're reading a verse, He'll recall to your mind some other verse that has the same keywords in it that applies to the verse you're reading. Okay, so let's look at Isaiah 52:15. In front of you, you'll see the screen of the verse. I'm just going to read it right now so that you get familiar with the words. Ken yazeh goyim rabim alai yikpitzu malachim pichem ki asher lo supar lechem rao wa asher lo shamu hitpunanu. Now, you're going to see in front of the screen a little chart. You can download the chart. It's in the video description. Just click on it. And the rest of Isaiah 52:15 will be covered in 3 more videos. It took too long. So, download the chart and look at it.